Great. And we are live. Hello, everyone who is watching this. My name is Justin Wassick, and as always, I'm your host of Fixture Focus here on American Hammers Network. With the upcoming London Derby this weekend, I have a very special guest with me today, Chris Miller from the Extra Inch podcast. Chris, how are you? Thank you very much for joining me today.
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, looking forward to it. Looking forward to a chat about this famous London derby. It's been a long international break, so it's going to be good to talk Spurs again.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thanks for joining me. You tend when I reach out to people related to Spurs media, you tend not to get too many responses from people just because I don't know, maybe the rivalry, maybe there's a little bitterness there. I don't know, but really appreciate your time. And yeah, I always like to start off by asking about my guests' backstory. So not only your own personal backstory and how you got into the journalism space, but also the backstory of how you became a Spurs fan, as well as the podcast, how that started and how that's came to be about.
Sure. So I mean, I could bore you for hours on this, but I mean, I've supported Spurs literally from being a baby. My dad had me in a Spurs bib when I was, under one, so there was no choice in the matter. Even if I'd wanted there to be a choice, there was absolutely no choice. And yeah, it's just gone from there. The whole family are Spurs fans. I say whole family. My sister and I, my mum and dad are Spurs fans. My dad just chose Spurs in the '60s. Him and my uncle were growing up in a period where Spurs and Burnley were two of the best teams. My dad picked Spurs, and my uncle picked Burnley, and it worked out well for me because I didn't have quite the long journey to get to home games.
Right.
So that was good. I just, my love for football and for Spurs progressed through my school life. My dad was very proud that by the end of my primary school, so that's age 4 to 11 here in the UK, I was the only one in my class who still supported Spurs by the end of it, because it was during the 90s. Most of my friends switched to being Man U fans.
Yeah.
And that was a real moment of pride for my dad when I was the last Spurs fan standing. I was a big Teddy Sheringham fan, a player associated with both of our clubs.
Yeah.
He was my first real hero. I adored Sheringham, adored watching him play, adored his style of play. He was the first one I had in the back of my shirt. So yeah, I mean, it's just in the blood, I suppose, and forced upon me to an extent, and that set me up well. So in terms of blogging and the Twitter account, I guess I always kind of frequented Spurs forums, and I quite liked having in-depth discussion about Spurs that I felt was sometimes lacking in mainstream media. So I would post long forum posts and respond to forum posts that were kind of long and analytical. And from there, a few people just said to me, "Hey, this is quite good. You should start putting some of this on a blog." I didn't really know what a blog was at that point, and I certainly didn't know how to start one. But with some help from a friend, I set up my blog, windycoys.com. This must be over a decade ago now, 12 or 13 years ago. And it just kind of went quite well. And from there, I set up a Twitter account with no intention of growing it and no skills to grow it. It just all happened organically. I got in at a good time on Twitter, really, where there was a really lovely football community and everyone was very supportive of one another and would retweet articles and tweets that not for any kind of gain for themselves, just because they enjoyed what you were saying or what you were writing. And that allowed me to grow my Twitter account. If I could go back to having a smaller Twitter account without the problems that come with having a large account, I would. But
I'm sure.
But yeah, it's all been organically done. And then finally the podcast. So I used to be a regular panelist on probably the biggest or the most popular Spurs podcast, The Fighting Cock, with a group of really close friends of mine. And I still love what they do to this day. It's a fantastic podcast on fan culture.
We were actually sorry to interrupt, but we were actually about to get those guys on with you alongside, but just the timing didn't work out. But Yeah,
Brilliant.
it is a good podcast. I've listened to a couple episodes. They're
It's
great.
fantastic. It's really fantastic. And then from that sprang my podcast, The Extra Inch, which the name was meant to be like a take on the Great British Bake Off Extra
Okay,
Slice kind
yeah,
of special thing. So that started 5 years ago, and it's myself and Bardi, who's another original member of the Fighting Cock panel, and Nathan Clark, who is a football analyst and a close friend of ours now. And it's the three of us on The Extra Inch. We've been recording solidly an episode a week at least for the last 2 years. We've just launched a Patreon, which is, I'm glad to say, going really well. And now we're putting out kind of bonus podcasts and episodes and things alongside that. So yeah, it's been a long journey, but lots of fun along the way.
awesome. Yeah, you mentioned that you started your blog and your account 12 or 13 years ago. I think that's a lesson that a lot of people, whether they're entrepreneurs or journalists or sort of in any field, it doesn't happen overnight, right? It sort of builds. You build a following slowly but surely over time. And yeah, thank you for the background. That's great to hear. So let's dive into your club now. Specifically, let's talk about some of the summer transfer business that you guys have, or summer transfer business that you guys have done so far. So obviously, I think from an outside perspective, it seems that you guys have had a successful window. I think you guys have brought in some good players: Vinicius, Reguilon, Oyberg. Of course, I think the biggest. Well, technically not a signing, but bringing back Gareth Bale on loan. You guys have had some outgoings, or the major outgoing I think is Vertonghen, I would say. Danny Rose seems to be on his way out if he isn't already. I haven't kept too on top of that. But overall, what are your thoughts on the business that you guys have done so far?
It's been a very pragmatic window. We've covered off lots of the squad needs, and I think every Spurs fan would say that they're very happy with the business we've done. I think getting a defensive midfielder or a defensive-minded midfielder was the absolutely crucial thing that was the complete bare minimum. So the signing of Højbjerg, although whilst not the most exciting signing, is the one that we needed the most. We couldn't go another year playing this Winks Sissoko pivot in midfield, which simply doesn't work for us. It's a mess of a midfield. So Højbjerg was a really good one to get done. And once we got that done, kind of anything else was a bonus, I suppose. Matt Doherty, I think, is a very sensible improvement at right back. Aurier is not a bad player on his day, but he's incredibly erratic, incredibly error prone. So signing a more stable player who can probably chip in.
You mean defensively?
Yeah, I mean he's not too bad going forward, although he's a bit cross heavy for my liking. But defensively very erratic, very prone to being just completely caught out by a run inside or some run movement behind him. So that was a really important one as well. But the thing that elevates this window for us, without a shadow of a doubt, is that special day we had where Reguilon and Bale obviously joined. Bale coming back on loan initially, and Reguilon is just what the doctor ordered at left back. We've been, we've had a dependable but unspectacular left back in Ben Davis. Who tries very, very hard and is not a bad player by any stretch, but he's not the kind of left back that's going to kick you into second or third. Reguilon might just do that. Reguilon he's much more dynamic and exciting. And then Bale is the cherry on top. I mean, who knows if Bale's going to manage to play 10 games for us, but the nostalgia alone is just, it's so exciting. It's really an exciting signing.
But why do you say who knows if he's going to play 10 games for you or not?
Just because of the fitness concerns around him. He's had a poor injury record over the last couple of years. He's not really been able to put strings of games together. I mean, part of that definitely comes down to the environment that he was in, and hopefully being in a more positive environment, he'll respond to that, and the drive will be to want to stay fit. And actually, we don't need to play him every game, because that might be a bad thing. I mean, we've seen with Harry Kane, if you play a player every game, then inevitably they're going to pick up knocks more frequently. So we'll manage him carefully, I'm sure, and he definitely needs to be managed carefully. But the upside of Bale is just very exciting for Spurs fans.
And so, and maybe in a way, you've already answered this question. It might just be an unknown at this point, given those fitness concerns. But obviously, Bale has come in on a loan. I mean, do you personally think that there's a good chance that that he can stay beyond this season, either coming back on another loan or having Spurs buy him? I mean, it seems like buying him may be too expensive. Although I'm not sure. I'd love your opinion on. I guess it's a little crazy to ask about Bale's future, given that he hasn't played a match for you guys yet. But I'm sure some Spurs fans have already started to think about that.
And I think this is the good thing about the transfer. It's kind of, in some ways, it's risk free because we just see what this year brings. Same with Carlos Vinicius. We just see what this year brings and make a decision at the end of the year. If things don't work out, they don't work out, and we both move on. I mean, I'm sure Bale would love to get out of Real Madrid for good. He's not he's not a happy man there. It's not worked out for him in the long term.
He's made that very public. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And he's said that he feels at home at Spurs. He feels comfortable at Spurs. I mean, I don't know. Maybe if we had an unsuccessful year, if we don't win a trophy, maybe he'll want to try and forge him a career elsewhere. He's probably got 2 or 3 years left in him, I would say, at the top level. We'll see. I would like to think that we can sign him up again next season if things go well this year. But there's no rush. There's no pressure on this. It's very much, suck it and see what happens.
And then the one player that I am a bit interested in is Danny Rose. So correct me if I'm wrong. He technically is still with the club, and I did watch the All or Nothing on Amazon Prime series, where it was very obvious that Danny Rose was the odd man out once Jose Mourinho came in, and they didn't dive too much into that, but I think it was a combination of Mourinho's just not rating him, plus Rose's, he was very upfront with the manager. Maybe Jose didn't like that. I'm speculating, but he's one of the longest, if not the longest serving Tottenham player currently on the squad. What have you heard about Danny Rose? Is he, I mean, he wasn't named in the Europa League squad. It seems like there really is just no future for him at the club.
We're actually half expecting him to join a championship club this week. And to be honest, I think that would be a really good move for him just to get his career back on track at this point.
Yeah.
It's a shame because he was my favorite player for a short spell. I loved watching him when he was marauding up our left flank under Pochettino. There was a period where we had Kyle Walker on the right and Danny Rose on the left, and we were just playing really expansive, free-flowing football, and both of them were huge parts of that. And then when Walker kind of, I guess you could say Walker forced his move to Man City.
Yeah.
Danny Rose tried to do the same. He tried to do something similar. He wanted to join another club, a bigger club where he could get paid what he felt he was worth. He sold his story to the Sun newspaper. Never a smart move, in my opinion. It went horribly wrong from there. He made it back for a bit, but I felt like the damage was done in many ways. And then there came a point where his ability it didn't match his confidence in his ability anymore. I mean, he was a fantastic left back for a short spell, 2 years, maybe 3, perhaps 3 years. And then he started to decline pretty rapidly. He had injuries catching up on him as well. And he just wasn't the same player. He really wasn't the same player. And he still thought he could offer what he used to offer. And it just didn't work out that way. And things have gone from bad to worse, really. I mean, you saw the confrontation in All or Nothing, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Which I didn't think it was as bad as many thought. I actually thought, I kind of appreciated his honesty and openness.
Yes.
And I didn't think Mourinho handled it that well. I thought both of them could have handled the situation better, in all honesty. But, those confrontations, I'm sure, are commonplace in football. It's a shame. It's a shame, but I mean, I must admit, I lost or a lot of my love for Rose when he went to the Sun and sold his story.
Yeah, and I know the Sun is not a beloved publication to say the least in the UK. Um, but yeah, it was just interesting to get your take. Obviously, I don't know as much as you do, given that I don't follow the club. But I did know that he was one of the longest serving members of the club. So just wanted to hear your opinion on that. Um, let's pivot now to the actual results. Obviously, this is all about getting results this game, and so far Spurs season, 2 wins, a draw, and a loss. Um, the loss came the first match of the season to Everton, 1-0. Since then, haven't lost. Still in the League Cup, made it through to Europa League, um, and your two victories, I mean, they weren't just victories; they were resounding victories. Especially the most previous one, 6 goals against United at Old Trafford. I don't care if there are fans in the stands or not, and I don't care if this isn't the United of old. I think that is always an impressive result. So yeah, interested to hear your thoughts on a season that didn't get off on the best the best start, but recently you guys seem to be playing really well with quite some attacking prowess.
Yeah, I mean the Man U game was really something special. I would say it's quite ironic, really, that Mourinho was. I'm going to say moaning because he was moaning about the fixture congestion with the Europa League fixtures, the League Cup, the league
Mm-hmm.
fixtures all coming in, a very short space of time. But actually, that has been the key factor in allowing us to build some momentum and build some confidence in
Mm-hmm.
our performance. Playing some of these teams in the Europa League, who, if I'm honest, they're not the best teams. Some of them have put up a bit of a fight, but we've pretty much been expected to just steamroller them. We did need a last minute penalty to win one of them, but ignoring that, that's been really helpful. It's been really helpful to Spurs. And as I say, it's allowed players to build momentum, to build fitness, where other teams have shown that they're really missing not having had a full pre-season. We've basically been able to have a full pre-season in terms of
Mm-hmm.
using the Europa League as a pre-season, and that's worked out well. It's funny. I thought the Newcastle draw, the 1-1 we had with Newcastle, the first half of that match was probably the best I'd seen us play under Mourinho until that point. Now, I would say the Man U match has superseded that. But the Newcastle game was interesting because we were playing against a team that wasn't adventurous. They didn't really want to come out and play against us. They just wanted to sit in and allow us to have the ball and create chances. And we really did create chances. We came up against the goalkeeper on the day who was in inspired form, and we were quite wasteful. But the chances were there. They were good quality chances as well. And I was really quite impressed, having been concerned at the back end of last season that we would struggle to break down these kinds of teams. That kind of, ultimately we drew the game. So it's kind of what I'm saying is perhaps mute, but I felt that was an important performance for us. Manu was just insane. I mean, obviously the sending off situation certainly helped, and it meant Manu couldn't play the way they wanted to play. But they were so passive anyway. Well, I think we kind of played them at a good time. The key, though, from Spurs was that we were so merciless. We smelt blood and we just went for them over and over and over again. And I think that is what Mourinho is about. Spot a weakness and just take advantage of it as much as possible and manipulate the game state to the greatest extent you can. And yeah, 6-1 was just insane. It was a fantastic team performance.
Hey, hey,
I lost you there.
yeah, I'm sorry about that.
I lost you there.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. It looks like there's an echo too, and a delay. Can you hear me all right, or okay? Yeah, sorry about that, Chris, and sorry about that to everyone. My internet just completely shut off, but um, I'm back. So the last thing that I heard you say was that um, essentially the Europa League actually benefited Spurs, given that you sort of used it as a preseason. So sorry to have you sort of repeat yourself, but if you could maybe start from that and go
Yeah,
from there.
sure thing. No problem. No problem. I was just saying that the Newcastle game was a really interesting one to me because unlike last season where I felt we struggled to play well against teams that kind of bunkered down and just defended against us, this was a game where we actually played really well against the team who did that. They had no ambition to come and attack. And we did genuinely create chance after chance after chance against them. And we should have won comfortably in that game. We were up against an inspired goalkeeper and we missed some chances. And they defended well at times. But I mean, it was a promising, encouraging performance from my perspective. And then Man U was just a bloodbath. Obviously, the sending off came at a really helpful time, and we were playing Man U at a helpful time because they're, like you said, a shadow of their former selves. They're not what they once were. They were very passive in midfield. The amount of time they gave us on the ball was something you don't really see very often in the Premier League, let alone at Old Trafford. And we just went for their throats, and we went over and over and over again. And Son and Kane are both in absolutely outstanding form at the moment. Some of the best form I've ever seen both of them in. I mean, I've been very critical of Mourinho in regards to some players, but there's absolutely no denying that he has very much got into Harry Kane's head and sincerely motivated him. And the same goes for Son. I mean, they're both just playing exceptionally at the moment. And I think any defense coming up against those two should be very scared.
Yeah, and I know we spoke about him a little earlier, but a healthy Bale added to that attack. I mean, that would be quite a three-headed monster. Bale, Son. Although Son plays mainly on the left, or did Bale mainly play on the right?
So he mainly played on the left in his last season, as I understand it, but he's just as comfortable playing in the 10 or on the right.
Yeah, I mean, either way, I think if Bale can stay healthy, that would be quite. I mean, yeah, like I said, quite a three-headed monster with those three. So yeah, I mean, given how the season's gone fairly well so far for you lot, what are your expectations? Have they changed at all since the beginning of the season? And I guess, yeah, what are they overall? Given the fact as well that, I mean, you're still in 4 competitions. You got the League Cup, obviously the FA Cup coming up next year, and then Europa and Premier League. So yeah, what are your expectations for you personally? And do you think that your expectations are reflected amongst the majority of the Spurs fan base?
Yeah, so I mean, I was slightly pessimistic at the start of the year. Before the signings of Bale and Reguilon, I kind of thought we might finish 5th or 6th, maybe even 7th, just because there were lots of good teams, and I think many of the better teams in the Premier League have really made good signings, had good windows, made progress in their squad development, and Everton are a prime example of that. Just adding a bit of gold dust has made a huge difference to them already. Having said that, now we've signed Bale, we've signed Reguilon, we've seen the start of the season, we've seen teams able to drop points. There's a very competitive league here. I've kind of readjusted my sights, and I think with the squad we have now, we should absolutely be aiming for the top 4, probably the top 3, and definitely a trophy, I think, as well. And if that doesn't happen, then it's in my eyes, it means something's gone wrong. It means either we've had severe injury problems, or we haven't been managed very well, or players have come off form at a crucial time. We definitely have the squad to challenge for top 4, top 3, and trophies. You mentioned being in 4 competitions, and that will be what hinders us in the league. I think I don't think we can win the league this season because of a number of competitions we're in, and I still believe, frankly, that Liverpool and Man City are incredible teams, and these results are a bit freaky because of the situation, because of a lack of pre-season. I think things will settle down and it will become more normal as such across the course of the season. But yeah, I mean, we've got a really, really good team. I mean, there's no getting around. We have on paper got a really, really good team, and we should be more than capable of finishing top 4.
So when you say, top 4, obviously Spurs are a big club, and given the recent success that you guys have had in Europe, I mean, it's reasonable to say that a lot of Spurs fans want Champions League football every year. But on the other hand, not a whole lot of trophies. I think your last one was in 2008, and before that, sometime in the 90s, maybe even earlier. So there hasn't been a lot of silverware, and that is something that I definitely have heard Spurs fans clamoring for. Is we want silverware. That's why you play football. It's for trophies. So would it be an unsuccessful season if so I know it'll definitely be an unsuccessful season in your eyes if you do not make top 4 and don't win a trophy. But what if only one of those 2 things happens? And if so, and if you do think that would deem a success, which would you rather have, a top 4 finish or a trophy?
That is a difficult question.
Yeah.
I think the majority of our fans are gagging for silverware. Silverware. A League Cup, to me, it doesn't really mean a great deal, especially if we're not there to see it lifted. I mean, watching Ledley King lift the League Cup with my dad next to me was a really special moment because Ledley King was one of my favourite players, and I was there with my dad, and it was incredible. Without that, I mean, do I really care if we win the League Cup? I mean, personally, not that bothered. Many fans absolutely are, and it would mean the world to them just to get that kind of monkey off the back and be able to say, look, we've won a trophy. This is something tangible that we can hang our hats on for all the good Pochettino did. And by God, he did some good. He never won us anything. Mm-hmm. Daniel Levy would see it differently. He'd be saying top 4. We need to be in the Champions League. We need that income stream. We need that sustainability. And I personally believe in the long term, in order to develop the team to be a sustainable, competitive team, we need to be in the Champions League because we need that increased revenue. We need to be able to reinvest. So we've obviously had a really productive transfer window this time around. We're not going to be able to do that every time without the Champions League revenue. We've passed up the opportunity to sell on some of our older players like Lucas, Aurier, Sissoko, players who are kind of approaching their 30s, who won't be worth so much money in a couple of years' time. We've kept them around because Mourinho wants a deep squad where there's lots of quality. So he needs to deliver something to justify that, and we're going to need the Champions League revenue to kind of make up that shortfall.
Yeah, it's a different game these days. Money is playing an ever more important role, especially if you want to be among the best of the best consistently. And I think the best way to get that is through consistent European football, especially Champions League. Let's pivot now to actual on the pitch. So I'm interested. So I mean, obviously everyone is familiar with Jose Mourinho, especially his style of play. For someone that hasn't followed Spurs since Mourinho has come into the side, could you briefly just explain the style of play that Jose has imparted on the Spurs squad? Is it any different from his United or Chelsea days? If so, how? So sort of just give a little baseline of what you would expect to see for a neutral maybe in this one from the Spurs side.
Sure. It's slightly tricky because since we signed Reguilon, things have changed a bit. So initially, what we were doing with Mourinho, we were playing a back 4, but Ben Davies would tuck in on the left of that 4 and make it into a 3 when we had the ball. And that meant that we had a very lopsided formation where Serge Aurier was very advanced on the right and Davies was a lot deeper on the left. So most of our attacks were coming through Serge Aurier. find Sergio Aurier as high up the pitch as possible, and he would just whip in cross after cross after cross after cross. That was our main weapon for much of the early Mourinho tenure. And Dele was a key focus as well. You know, he was playing in the 10 role, but when I say plays as the 10, I mean, he's really playing up with the striker and making runs off the striker. Obviously, that's all changed now. So we've replaced Davis with Reguilon, who is a much more dynamic, agile, quick left back who will get up and down and cover the whole flank rather than just part of it. And so we've already adapted our style. We are now playing a much more traditional 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1, depending on how you look at it. And Højbjerg drops in between the centre-backs, so it kind of kickstarts our possession play. Reguilon then pushes up the pitch along with the right back, who will probably be Doherty. And then Ndombele, who was kind of sidelined last year, he's just such an important player now. So he'll be there, I'm sure, in midfield alongside Højbjerg, possibly with Lo Celso, if we can name our best midfield, in my view. And the ball, a lot of the ball come through Ndombele, and he's the one playing the line breaking passes into Kane, into Son, and making things happen for us. There is lots of counter attack, or certainly it depends on the style of a team we're playing against, but there's lots of counter attack against teams that like to have the ball. Obviously, that wasn't the case against Newcastle, and that was why I was so impressed with that performance. I don't know. What do you think? How do you think West Ham are going to approach the game?
Well, what's been working for us has been a 3 at the back system. It's really masked our weaknesses, which mainly on defense are lack of pace, and a lack of ability to really play out of the back successfully. If there's only 4 back there, but putting an extra defender back there again provides extra cover for our center backs. And on top of that, it's put Arthur Masuaku, who has been playing in a wing back role. That's really where that's where his talents shine. He's actually, when you were talking about Serge Aurier and sort of how he was always error prone defensively, it reminded me of Masuaku. He is also the same way. I've never really rated him as a defender, but moving forward, with the ball at his feet attacking, he's actually quite good. He's actually quite flashy. Maybe not necessarily always making the correct pass, but I think the more he plays in that role, the better I think he will become at that. So we've been playing 3 at the back, 2 wing backs. We've been playing Souček, the Czech signing that we made permanent this summer. He's been playing along with Rice, sort of in front of the 3 center backs. And then our front 3 has sort of been 2 wings. Pablo Fornals on the left, who's not really a natural winger, and Jared Bowen, who's been playing really well on the right, and then Mikel Antonio has been our striker. It's just interesting because it's sort of a hodgepodge of players that maybe aren't playing in their more natural role. Fornals isn't a winger naturally. Antonio's not a striker naturally. But it's worked for us. 2 clean sheets against Wolves and Leicester. And we'll be looking to, and this is why I'm actually interested in what you said last, when you play teams that like to have a lot of the ball, you counterattack. That's sort of how I think we have been successful, is we don't like to possess the ball. We're not that good at possessing the ball for too long. And we like to counterattack, and we've been successful with that, and that's how we've scored our goals. So, I mean, Chris, given that you're facing a team that isn't going to be possessing the ball that much, you guys will most likely outpossess us. How do you think that will change the game plan?
It's really interesting. I feel like it might simply come down to who has the better players. And I know it's a really kind of boring, kind of easy way out answer, but I think that's it. Mourinho is the master at manipulating the game state, waiting for mistakes, keeping his team compact, not committing too many players forward, waiting for the opposition to slip up, and then stealing in, scoring. Before you know it, the game's over. He's got the second goal and he's seen the game out. That's what he's brilliant at. Recently, though, he's had us starting really fast. He's had Kane. I mean, Kane and Son are. When I say they're unplayable at the moment, I'm not exaggerating. I don't know how anyone can get a grip on them when they're in this form. The only thing that might go in your favour is that Kane has got this muscle fatigue, as Gareth Southgate called it, and maybe Kane won't quite be in the same form as a result of that. But if we start fast and get an early goal, I feel very confident. Equally, if West Ham defend well and defend deep and restrict space for Son running in behind, then I think you could cause us problems, because Antonio is a threat every time he plays against Spurs. But frankly, every time he plays against anyone at the moment, he's playing really well and has been for the best part of a year. He's a good player. Our centre-backs are our key weakness, and he will really fancy his chances, I think, against our centre-backs. I could see this game, honestly, being a high-scoring game, like a 3-2 or something, if both teams set out to exploit mistakes. But equally, it really wouldn't surprise me if it ended up being a 0-0 with neither manager wanting to commit to anything, because they both have that pragmatism at the root of their management styles.
Yeah, and I think it's a nice little segue into sort of wrapping this up. And obviously, we have to make some predictions to see who's right and who's wrong. But yeah, I mean, you mentioned a couple possibilities there, and I definitely agree with you that those are possibilities and potential scorelines we may see. I have a scoreline in mind. I always decide whether to go with my head or my heart. I'm going with my head this week, but I always let my guests go first. So, what do you think the final score will end up being?
Well, for the sake of excitement, let's go with my 3-2. I think Spurs will win 3-2. I think it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if we score a couple of goals and look secure, and then West Ham sucker punch us and get back into it, and we're reliant on someone putting something special out the bag at the end for a 3-2 win.
Yeah, I'm going to go with a Spurs win as well. It pains me to say that, but yeah, I do think it will be a good game in terms of I do think that both clubs will get a few good chances. I do think that we have been better defensively with that three at the back system, like I mentioned, which I think may give you guys some problems in terms of it may take you a half to really figure out how to break us down. However, you just can't ignore the form, as you mentioned, of your two main attacking threats. And I do think that they'll squeak by and figure out a way to score some goals. I do think that we'll score as well off a counter. We've been doing very well at that. It's tough. I'm hoping for a point, but I will say that Spurs are going to eke out this victory. I'm going to go 2-1. I'm going to go Sonny with a brace, just because I feel like he's been scoring against us quite a bit lately. And then I'll go Jared Bowen with our goal on a counterattack. But I do think we're going to give you guys a good run. I don't think you'll walk all over us, assuming we stick with that three at the back system. But we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully, we're both wrong, and West Ham can get something out of it, because it would be a very good point for us. Of course, we want all three, but it would be. I take a point right now. Absolutely. Well, yeah, Chris. Again, as I said at the beginning of this show, thank you for coming on. Apologies for the technical difficulties there for a few minutes. And just for anyone who's watching this, Chris, do you want to maybe tell people where they can read you or hear you?
Yeah, sure thing. So my Twitter is Windy Coys. I'm actually having a bit of a break from social media at the moment, just because I think it's healthy to do so every now and again. But I'll be back there in a couple of weeks, I'm sure. My blog is windycoys.com. If you want to listen to the podcast, it's The Extra Inch. We do have some listeners who aren't Spurs fans. I think we talk enough we talk generally enough about football that it would be interesting for people who aren't Spurs fans. But perhaps in the lead up to this one, some West Ham fans might want to listen and find out what we thought of the Man U game, for example. It might be quite an interesting listen. But yeah, that's it. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Really nice to be on.
Yeah, and would love to do this again for the reverse fixture.
Absolutely. Sure thing.
Anytime.
Anytime.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it.
All right.